Great. So great to see everyone as usual for some practice. Oh, let's see, there's just another couple of people signing on. So we'll just take a moment to organize our body in whatever way works. It might be different this time than last time, than 2 hours ago. Your legs, your arms, your torso. Maybe you need less support, more support. Adjust your position. So, not sure if the weekly reminders are making it into your inbox, but I mentioned in yesterday's that I thought we could work with the theme of sensory clarity, work with that particular skill. So, not surprising that I'm often very conscious of, because of my connection with Shinzen Young, my teacher, with these three main skills that he would suggest we're working with, we're cultivating, developing through our meditation practice. And one is sensory clarity, really our ability to know what's going on, to discern between kind of the different elements of our experience, meaning, okay, I'm feeling anxiety. Is that physical sensation? Is it mental talk? Is there mental image in there? Being able to tease the pieces of our experience apart is part of sensory clarity. And another part of sensory clarity is detection. So being able to notice with finer and finer granularity, like what's going on. So with the example I just used with anxiety, now I know that, oh yeah, there's a physical sensation related to my anxiety. Now I can start to kind of detect more and more finer details about that. Where in my body is it located? How intense is it? How much space does it take up? Is there some movement? So we can kind of just bear that in mind, and I'll certainly include cues in our practice today that there are these two prongs to sensory clarity, kind of discerning the parts and then detecting the finer details. So I think I'd like to work primarily with body sensation. I think for most people, it's a pretty easily accessed sensory category. But if you wanted to work with really any aspect of your experience that's more relevant for you today, feel free to apply. Same principles apply to any of the sensory categories. So let's go for it. Let's settle in. Because we're focusing on body sensations, you might find it helpful to have your eyes closed, but know that's always an option. Let's start with a check-in. Now, I've heard it phrased like, what does it feel like to be you in this moment? Let's do a little inventory. So we can bring that discerning attention as we check in here. Is there a lot of mental activity? Or is it pretty quiet in there? Is there a mood or emotional state that's present you can notice? And if so, is that showing up mostly as a physical sensation? Maybe some mental talk, maybe mental image contributing? One of the great things about working with sensory clarity is we can appreciate how the senses are kind of connected and impact with the other. Maybe you notice there's a dog barking from the yard next door, and that kind of outer auditory activity is having an impact on your emotional state, your emotional sensations in the body and or mental talk. It can, as another option, even kind of rank, like if you had a little bar graph in this moment, would you say that there's one particular sensory category, say your physical sensations are taking up most of the bandwidth? Is it the mental talk or mental image? Would call that hear in or see in activity. And it's not static. So sensory clarity is not just about being able to discern it or detect, but to track and explore this in real time because it's constantly changing. Okay, so let's head into the body space. We can include purely physical sensations and sensations we feel are there as a result of our emotional state. So, all physical sensations, all body space included in our focus range. And the next kind of exercise of discerning I'd invite you to do is let's find where the body has more active sensations, and let's see if we can find places in the body where it's more restful or neutral or relaxed. In order to do this, you can let your attention freely float and notice, oh, wow, yeah, okay, there's tension in my shoulders, more active, but my elbows actually feel pretty neutral, relaxed, restful. Or you could do just a light body scan. Just start with the top or bottom and explore more systematically. Either way, we're strengthening that sensory clarity skill by making that discernment between active and restful in the body. You could use a label if that felt like it was supportive for your practice. Active is not a standard label that is really suggested in unified mindfulness, but you could use it, active and restful. The label we would usually recommend is feel for more active sensations and rest or more neutral or restful. What I mean by active is there something to kind of notice, whether it's a temperature, kind of hot, cold, pressure, pinching, pulsing or movement, the density. And rest is relatively neutral, relaxed. There can be a bit of overlap. It's not always so clear. Maybe my arms feel quite relaxed, but there's a very subtle tingling, in which case you can kind of make that call for yourself. You can interpret that as restful or interpret that as a very subtle activity. Either is fine. You might notice your attention gets pulled now and then into thoughts or sounds in the room around you. As soon as you realize it's happened, you can release your attention, allowing these distractions to be in the background, returning your attention to body space. So concentration and sensory clarity work together. Without concentration, we're not probably going to have a lot of success holding our attention with what it is we're looking to track and explore. So I'm going to suggest we now let go of that discernment between active, restful, and now work the detection skills a little more. Let's find an active sensation to work with. Could be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Could be subtle, could be strong. If there's not much going on by way of sensation, you can always choose to work with the breath, finding a sensation related to the breathing cycle. We're going to zoom in onto that particular sensation. All else, including other body sensations, allowing them to recede into the background. Let's see what we can detect. Warmth, coolness, density, spaciousness, movement, changes, bubbling, pulsing, energy, moving. Does it feel tight or relaxed? The shape, the size. I haven't mentioned equanimity yet, but we're trying to bring an attitude of curiosity, openness to whatever it is we're working with. And if there's any kind of story or narrative playing in the mind about what we're focusing on, the ideas about the source, the cause, whether it's good or bad, a plan to work with it in future, that's included in the background. So we're going to try to not really take into account or give weight to what the mind has to offer. After you've spent some time, feel free to release your attention. How much time is completely up to you. Maybe work with another sensation, maybe even a restful sensation. If you'd like to open this up to all experience, you could transition to a see, hear, feel practice. If you are wanting to have an exclusive noting practice, it means you're going to tease out one thread at a time of your experience, whether it's visual, including what you see in the mind, auditory, including mental talk, or somatic, emotional or physical sensations. You're going to make that discernment first, and then detect finer nuances, details. Whether they're active or restful. If you're working with sound, you might notice what direction the sound is coming from, volume, whether it's a constant sound or it fluctuates. Not going into the meaning. Try to catch when the mind gets hooked. If you're working with visual, whether it's mental images or what we see with our eyes open, you can look for color and shape, movement, shadow, reflection. Sensory clarity, especially with the mind activity, doesn't mean we are clear about the content. The images themselves don't need to be clear. We may not be able to make out much in the way of detail, but we can be clear about that it's more fleeting, less stable, less vivid. So using a pace that works for you, you want to label, which can be very helpful. Maintain some traction with our practice. You could label see, hear, or feel, or any labels that work for you. And that discerning phase. As our sensory clarity skill develops, we may have more access to experiences of spaciousness, sense of stillness, even within more active sensations. Can feel like there's a thinning out of what seemed quite solid and separate. And there can also be a kind of integrating between the senses, meaning it gets harder to actually discern, maybe even impossible, between see, hear, feel. It's like there's this unification. That's a good thing. So your sensory clarity is high, but there's less and less distinction. That may or may not be your experience. It doesn't need to be, but just to know that that's a possibility. In which case your sensory clarity is now picking that up. If you're bringing sensory clarity to challenging experiences, trying to also bring some equanimity along. Try to be even welcoming, friendly with what you're focusing on, because increasing our sensory clarity on unpleasant sensations without equanimity can mean we're experiencing more unpleasant. We're potentially experiencing more suffering. But being able to detect more and more subtlety in our experience can be equanimity inducing. And we can untangle the parts of our experience, deconstruct it. It can also be very fulfilling for the more pleasant experiences, more complete experience of it. For the last couple minutes of the practice, you feel interested in doing so, you can open your eyes but not already open. And let's work a little sensory clarity with the outer visual field. The mind has this very helpful at times habit of taking pieces of information and putting them together to create, a familiar, kind of trusted world and self. But with our eyes open, looking around, try to almost see things like it's for the first time. We make a lot of assumptions about the objects that we see through the eyes. Let's look for color and shape. Some things may be very clear and sharp, others out of focus. And we could have a relaxed gaze, maybe let the attention go more to the periphery, the outer boundary of what we can see. It's a different way of seeing. Or Shinzen will sometimes say you can look through the world, not at it. And that brings us to the end of our guided practice. So we can